welcome to AT&T ThreatTraq for February 19, 2013. This program provides network security highlights, discussion, and countermeasures for cyber threats. I'm Jim Clausing. Joining me today, I have Stan Nurilov and Josh Lackey. And I wanted to start off the show today with a brief update on the special report that I did last Thursday on the Adobe 0-day. Adobe has updated their security advisory, and they are planning on releasing a new update that fixes the 0-day sometime this week. So on the lookout for that, and as soon as it shows up, you'll want to apply patches there. One of the other vulnerabilities that came to our attention in the last couple of days was a security bulletin put out by Red Hat as affecting Red Hat and Fedora. It's a race condition within ptrace in the Linux kernel. And there's not a whole lot of detail on it yet, but the thing to be on the lookout for is if there's a vulnerability in ptrace, it's quite likely that it affects more than just Red Hat. It probably is in other distributions, since they all are based on the same kernel source. So that's one that I just don't, as I said, we don't have a lot of detail yet, but just to be on the lookout for that one.
The other guess would, of course, be that since it's a problem with ptrace, it's going to be a local-only exploit. So you wouldn't necessarily have to worry about an attacker across the world exploiting this on your box, on your Linux box. But if they already had an account, or if they were able to get onto your box in some other way, then they could probably gain root access at that point. Just a guess.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Thanks, Josh. Yeah, it's not clear that it could be used for anything more than privilege escalation, so it would require the ability to get on the box another way. That's an excellent point. The one other thing that I wanted to mention was based on a blog post by a researcher in Norway, Peter Hanstein, that I saw over the weekend. We've talked, we often see that SSH is one of the ports that's being scanned most frequently, people trying to guess passwords and so forth. And one of the suggestions that people always make is, well, put your SSH on a non-standard port. Well, what this guy discovered is that the bad guys are now starting to scan for SSH on some of the standard, non-standard ports. One of the common ones is 2222 instead of 22 TCP. People move it up to 2222 TCP. And this guy discovered is he had a little honeypot out there and was collecting password guessing attempts, and he found folks were looking for SSH on some of these other ports that people often move. So, yeah, just moving it to another port isn't necessarily going to keep you from password guessing type attackers. Anybody else had any other thoughts on that? But it's something that, we see a lot of the scanning, and how do you get around it? With SSH in particular, one of the things I like to do on my home system is just disable password logins completely and only allow logins using the keys.
I mean, I think still moving the port on your own SSH is a good idea, and not because you're going to stop. I mean, I guess you raise the bar a little. But the reason I do it is because it seriously cuts down all the log entries for all the really dumb password guessers on just port 22. So at least by moving it, you don't have quite so many security logs to go through.
Right, you don't have as many of them, although you'll now still have some of them, as this guy was pointing out. Yeah.
but it should definitely, I think, be used with what Jim has suggested with the SSH key, so that a brute force password attack wouldn't work.
Yeah, and that's the one time that does cause me problems, though, is when for some reason I don't have my own laptop with me, and so I don't have one that's already got my private key on it that I can use to log in.
So you just post the private key on your website, just in case? Don't do that, please. Anybody, don't.
That was a joke for all of our audience out there. No. But anyway, so I guess the point, though, is folks are starting to look for SSH on some of the non-standard locations. But as Josh said earlier, I think moving it off there, it can help you weed through some of the noise, and then some of the other countermeasures we've talked about, the private key kinds of things. Okay, Stan, you had something about malware using some new techniques or something?
Yes, actually, we recently came across an article, a blog entry by Sophos, and they describe a technique used by web exploit writers where they inject JavaScript into valid files that are hosted by legitimate websites. So you may have a small, what actually they pointed out is that there's a lot of small businesses out there that are susceptible to this, and they don't describe how a business might become compromised, but once they do, and the attacker has a way to update their files on their web server, what they do is they usually insert some JavaScript into some very standard file. One file they actually mention is a file that's used by a lot of applications that use JavaScript. It's JQuery, the JQuery library. So there's nothing wrong with JQuery itself, but what the attackers do is they put their own additional JavaScript somewhere in the middle or on top of the valid library. And what basically that has the effect of doing is when the jQuery library is loaded on each client, it also runs the malicious JavaScript. So it can be used for a lot of things, one of which is to redirect people to other malicious websites, or where they could be exploited with other well-known type of exploit kits, such as Black Hole or something like that. This actually also reminds me, this article reminded me of something I read fairly recently about a very similar technique where attackers are able to inject content into legitimate websites using malvertising. So what happens is they are somehow able to get an advertisement or some kind of JavaScript content into a legitimate advertisement, and those advertisements they get distributed to very, very popular websites. So what happens is you could be visiting a website that is very legitimate and has a very good business purpose for you to go there, but that website might be serving ads. And those advertisements may have the malicious JavaScript in them. And it's kind of a similar technique. So I guess the key there is to maybe know what it is that you're serving. I think a lot of even content generators, like websites that serve ads, will probably in the future will want to pay closer attention to what they're allowing to come in through their ad networks.
I think that's an excellent idea for a service. I know that this issue, this dynamic content from malvertising, has been discussed for a while, and so I think you just described a great service. We're giving out business ideas too here.
Yes.
Thanks, Stan. I think you had another.
Yes, well, it's that time of year again to pay your taxes and start filling out your tax refunds. So obviously, we see the same trend continuing in spam. Spam is now coming with messages that purport to help you with your tax refund. And basically, it's the same type of spam that we see every year. You have to click a link, and that may take you somewhere unexpected, and you might get taken over with an exploit kit. The company Webroot on their blog just posted some recent samples of such malware that redirects you to the well-known black hole exploit kit. So just be on the lookout for any type of email that you don't expect and that's soliciting your services, and make sure if it's something that you're not expecting, you have to be extra vigilant when you click on it.
Yeah, one of the things that I have heard about, I haven't actually seen any samples yet, but I heard because the fiscal cliff deal took place, after right at the beginning of the year, and so there was some question as to what was going to happen with tax rates, and some forms weren't finalized until I believe this week. The IRS is just releasing a couple of the forms, and so I've heard that there are some potentially targeting accountants that look for these final versions, spam targeting those accountants in particular that might be preparing taxes. So.
One piece of advice, something I do, if I am interested in something that appears just sort of out of nowhere in my email, and I want to click it, sometimes what I'll do instead is just open up a browser and type in the name, so just to make sure that there's no extra tricks going on. So maybe I won't do the full URL, but I'll at least do the website itself just to try to see, is this a good site? I mean, that's not perfect, but it's certainly better than just blindly clicking on a link.
Yeah, it's a good thing to remind ourselves that these regular sorts of spam campaigns occur, and just to be on the lookout for them. And that brings us to our internet weather report. And there were just a couple of things that kind of jumped out at me this week, so we'll take a look at some of the activity that we've been seeing this week. The first one was there was the increased scanning on port 3072 TCP. And 3072 TCP, one of the services that runs there is Continue Store Monitor. I'm not even sure what exactly that application is. But in the last day or two, we've seen a pretty significant spike scanning up to nearly 100 million sources or flows per hour. This is scan flows. Primarily, the folks doing the scanning here are in the U.S. and Turkey. Not sure exactly what it is they're looking for, and there are about 50 sources there. But it's something that I hadn't seen before, and so be on the lookout for this kind of traffic, and you try to figure out exactly what it is that they're scanning for.
Now, I know that there recently have been a bunch of talk about breaking into video recorders and security devices on the internet. The service you mentioned there at that port, I don't even know what that is. But maybe, I don't know if my guess is right, but is it something to do with maybe searching for video cameras? I don't know why it would only be in Turkey, though. This is very strange. Yeah,
it's the big scanners were primarily in the U.S. and Turkey, and I don't believe that this one is related to video cameras, but we just don't have enough information yet. As I said, it just popped up in the last day or two. If any of you out there are able to capture any of this traffic, we'd be interested in seeing what it is that it's going after. We'll continue to keep our eye on it, and if we have any more information, report that to you next week. One of the other ports that's seen a big jump the last couple of days is port 1024 TCP. And this 1024 is it's the first of the so-called ephemeral ports. So you'll often see that port used at random as a source port for some generic outgoing TCP connection. There isn't anything in particular that normally listens on 1024. So again, I'm not sure exactly what's going on here, but again, there's this peak in the last day or two that pretty closely mirrors the peak on port 3072, but it doesn't look like the sources are the same, so I don't know if it's related or not. But it's just something to keep an eye on, and we'll continue to investigate and see if we can figure out what's going on with this one. So let's look at our 10 most probed ports, like we do every week. And not unexpected, the top port is 445 TCP, as we always see, often configure, open file shares, whatever. And the zero access ports that we've been tracking for the last few months, the 16464 UDP, 16471 UDP, 3389 remote desktop protocol. And here are these two that I just showed the other graphs on. They've jumped up there, and again, it's not really clear what it is the bad guys are looking for. Something we'll keep an eye on. The rest of these are also normal ports that we see every time. Microsoft SQL Server, Telnet, and VNC, virtual network. Look at the most sources probing. These are all standard ports that we see pretty much every week. Again, 445 is by far the biggest. Zero access, 16464, 71, 16465, and 16470 UDP. Then Telnet, desktop protocol, and Microsoft SQL Server. So these are all pretty much the standard ports we see every week. And that does it for our internet weather. We wanted to try something a little different here and see how this works for the next couple of shows. I'm going to take a look at the number one security issue that's on everyone's mind this week. So, Stan, what is it that you're thinking about?
Well, it's actually something I think about all the time, not just this week. And for me, it's the management of my online identity. And really what my concern is its exposure. So over the years, I guess, I've accumulated very many identities, all for different services and different places. And they're kind of managed by each of those entities separately. And they each have their own way of securing that information. But really, all it takes is just one of those accounts to be compromised in any way, be it my fault or somebody else's, and a snapshot of my life is exposed. It kind of worries me a little bit. One thing I guess I try to do in order to make myself feel a little bit better about all these different accounts I have is make sure I have a different password for each of my online accounts. This way, in case any one of them gets compromised, at least I have all the other ones still secure. And whenever I do find out about a breach, either in the news or if the company notifies me, I would go ahead and right away change the password as soon as possible. And of course, the other part of that piece is to make sure that I always access my accounts from just trusted PCs, PCs I have control over. So that's my kind of my concern.
The other thing, I actually really appreciate those concerns. I'm kind of a fan of phones. I think my phone's more secure than my PC. So a lot of times I'll access things over my phone if I'm worried about it, right? You know, if someone asked me if I would rather connect to my online bank via my son's desktop or my son's phone, I would definitely pick his phone. So just some advice from a mobile fan that phones, you could probably trust them maybe a little bit more. Don't sue me if you can't, but I personally think my phone's more secure than my desktop.
In some regards, I would tend to agree with that because there's not as, I would say, first of all, it's probably not as targeted of a platform, and that kind of helps at least a little bit.
Not yet, right? I mean, it's going there. And I think, like, a big thing about phone security is simply because, desktop computers are so old and they support all this legacy stuff. And phones, in general, were able to sort of start fresh. And so a lot of the things they do are just, newer and probably more secure. So not perfect, but I think they had an advantage just when they were, first designed, basically.
Okay, so Josh, what are you thinking about this week?
Well, again, yeah, if you're going to ask me every week, it's going to be the same answer. So I don't know how interesting that's going to be. But so I just said I trusted my phone more. But really, the thing I'm always most worried about is malware. And so, I mean, personally, I like very technical bugs. It's very interesting for me to find 0 days in very technically difficult things like that ptrace in the Linux kernel. That's a very interesting bug, right? And but really, attackers don't just attack with very interesting bugs. A lot of times they're not just attacking your computer, they're socially attacking you. They're getting you to run code that they wrote that's malicious, and they're not, like, exploiting a bug. They're just getting you to do it. They're like, well, here's a really cool program that I know you want to run. So, I mean, I think the problem is, it's all you dang users out there, right? I mean, it's user education. So I think, if it sounds too good to be true, if there's a program that everybody else is out there paying for, but somehow somebody gave it to you for free, all you got to do is run the program on your phone, you might, just be a little bit suspicious. So, I guess the best advice is just to pause a little bit and think about what you're about to run. Do you trust the person that you got the program for, or the company that you got the program from? So I think malware is a big problem, and I think it's going to be a big problem for a long time. And it's up to us users to just try to think a little bit before you press start.
Thanks, Josh. What I'm thinking about this week is active content in documents. We've seen over the years, all these vulnerabilities in various document formats and graphic formats. I know these days that users tend to like all the bells and whistles and flashy stuff. But, documents are documents. I read my email in text. I don't want JavaScript being executed in my PDF documents. I don't know, maybe that makes me old-fashioned or a Luddite of some sort, but active content in documents seems like overkill to me, and that's because it's such an easy infection vector. It's something that's on my mind this week.
And it happens frequently. We were even talking about it earlier, right, with this JQuery stuff, wasn't it? I mean, isn't that essentially injecting executable content in things that didn't necessarily have that content before? Yeah, that's a wide-ranging problem. Happens in many places.
With that, I think that's our show for today. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can email us at threattrack@list.att.com. Follow us on Twitter at @ThreatTraq. The ThreatTraq video is available at att.com/ThreatTraq and on YouTube, and you can subscribe to the audio-only feed on iTunes. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks, Josh and Stan. We'll be back next week with a new episode. Until then, keep your network safe.
Thanks, guys.